Thank you so much for joining us. We are back with the UK OSINT community webinar series, and today we have Rae Baker, who is a manager OSINT analyst at a large consulting firm specializing in maritime intelligence, human intelligence, US sanctions research, and more. Rae has a background in graphic design, and she has several volunteer positions, executive board member of the OSINT Curious Project, team lead at Operation Safe Escape, also private licensed private investigator, and owner of Case Scenarios, an immersive training experience. She's presented at conferences around the world, and I am so happy to have her here today. That is such an impressive bio. There's so many different hats.
I'm happy to be here.
I-
Yeah, it sounds very impressive when you say it like that.
Because it is.
I just think of them one at a time, but then when you list them out, it sounds ridiculous.
No, it's really cool. I guess we'll just start with you've had an interesting background. I know you were a bit further along your career in graphic design when you decided to make a switch. So I was just wondering if you could tell the audience how you what motivated you to pivot to something completely different, but obviously there are some overlaps, which I'm sure we'll discuss.
Yeah, so in all honesty, in high school, I was kind of a slacker. I like to game the system. I found out that I could skip a whole lot of school and then I could go in and just take the tests.
Yeah.
So I ended up skipping quite a bit of high school. So I didn't really care too much about college at the time. I just wanted to get over with school.
Yeah.
So I picked something that I thought was going to be easy because I had already been doing art pretty much my whole life as a child. I had been doing a lot of art.
Yeah.
And my parents did a lot of art and stuff. So it came very easy. So I went to school for graphic design, and I felt like it was pretty easy to get through school, even though I skipped a lot of that too. I managed to pass and graduate, and I worked in a corporate graphic design job. I was a manager for 15 years. I liked it. I like art, but it just got to be I want to say annoying.
Fair enough.
You make art. You want art to be like your own feelings, your own thoughts, your own art.
Yeah.
And then when you're doing it corporate, it's like, oh, change this, change that, and it gets very exhausting after a while. So looking back, when I was having my first child, I was looking back thinking is this what I really want to do? I'm making kind of above minimum wage, working in this job. I love art, but it's killing it for me. And, I'm not making a lot of money. And I feel like I kind of skated through high school and college. I think I could go back for something a little more challenging. And I had a friend at the time she was just dating somebody off of Tinder or something. And he was in cybersecurity, and she was like, oh yeah, he makes $100,000 a year. And I was like, that sounds pretty good right now. It's I bet I could do cybersecurity. So I started looking into it. I went back to Penn State for cybersecurity. I was 30, I can't do math, 38. 38.
Nice.
I went back to school for cybersecurity. I was doing an associate's in networking, IT stuff, and it rolled into a bachelor's for risk analysis. And from there, I just kind of started looking for cybersecurity jobs, and that's how I fell into OSINT.
That's cool. So I heard when you were back in university, you started I think it was a tech club. Was it just general technology, and that's kind of how you learned maybe more about OSINT at the time, or?
Yeah, so this was my trick. So because I was in graphic design and I was in a marketing department, I lived that for so long. So when I was pivoting careers, I'm like, how how do I get a job in
Yeah.
cybersecurity? Like, you need to know so much. Where do you start? What do you look at? How do people know who you are? So I just fell back on kind of the things that I knew. I knew how to market things. So I was like, I'll market myself. So I
Yeah.
kind of rebranded myself online. I like threw away all my old like Twitter stuff and just started
Hmm.
fresh, picked a username, and I was like, I'm gonna talk in this certain voice the whole time. Like, I'm gonna say certain things. I'm only gonna post about XYZ. And when I was going to school, I was trying to join clubs, and there was a technology club because I was doing online school World Campus at
Hmm.
Penn State, so it's all
Yeah.
online. And the lady was like, "You could take over this club because it's just been stagnant since the last people graduated." And I was like, "Okay, I'll take over the club." Because I figured that I could learn while I'm like integrating and networking with the people, the students at in Penn State, and I could start to learn some things. And I took the club, and what I did was I went on Twitter and LinkedIn, and I started kind of searching and friending people who did cyber, like big names in
Yeah.
cybersecurity. And then I would just reach out and say, I am from the Penn State Technology Club. I was wondering if you would want to give like a virtual talk or interview, kind of like you're doing
Yeah.
here with our students. And it was a small group of students, and they would come and they would give a presentation, and then I would have a networking connection with them. And that's how I met a lot of people in cybersecurity, and actually how I got into OSINT, because one of the people I had on offered, it was Patrick Laverty
Hmm.
from Layer 8 conference. And he was like, I have these tickets for my conference and we give them out to students. Would you like one? And sure, yeah. So I went in 2019 to the Layer 8 conference, and I think it was 2019. And they had a Trace Labs Capture the Flag there. I played in it, and my jobs team, they came in first place, and we came in second with the technology club. And then they started reaching out to me on Twitter and looking at my blog and the posts I was making, and they asked me to apply. So that's how I skated into OSINT from the side.
Wow, it's really interesting because I feel like when I have gone to like a few conferences, I've met so many interesting people, and the OSINT community has been very welcoming to like newcomers, even though we
Yeah.
haven't been around for so long. I suppose like well, I've really only been like involved in like OSINT and for the past like 3 4 years, but people are so willing to help. I think that's what's like so cool about this community because it
Yeah.
seems to be like more inclusive of like new people who want to learn because we're just like trying to raise the profile of OSINT. So I guess, it's like,
Yeah.
but do you feel,
And it's
yeah,
relatively small.
it is. Yeah. I mean, I guess, well, you're based in the US. Is that right? Okay,
Yes.
cool. And where are you from originally? I didn't ask.
I grew up in Pennsylvania,
Okay, cool.
so that's where my heart resides, right outside of Philly. So
Oh,
I
nice.
identify with Philadelphia.
Okay. And then I don't know if your LinkedIn like is where you are. Is it like Alabama? I couldn't remember. Are you in the South or?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm in the South.
Okay.
I moved down there. There's a lot of surprisingly a lot of OSINT jobs around here
Oh,
because you have FBI, you
true.
have the Redstone Arsenal, you have all of these military related things. So OSINT is a pretty big field in this area. You wouldn't think it is,
I
but
had no idea, honestly. I'm from
yeah.
New York and like so I just assume okay, everything's in New York or like then I was in DC, so like I've just kind of focused on that, but that's interesting. But
In Colorado.
Colorado, yeah, I have seen a few
Yeah.
things in Colorado. Yeah, I do like the outdoors, so that'd be nice. But anyway, so you did this capture the flag, and then so ever since you've been at like consultancy, and I know like you talked about building your brand, and you're like, okay, I'm just gonna say certain things, and I'm gonna scrap everything. But like, how did you go about? Do you have any tips for people who they want to have some sort of brand or at least profile so that they have some sort of credibility because when you're starting out, like as you've done volunteer positions, and I've kind of told people about, you can do these volunteer to kind of try to do the hands-on application before you might be in a position, applying for some entry level roles. But how do you increase your visibility online? How do you even consider like what your brand would be? I think that it's kind of a general question, but you've done a really good job
Yeah.
of it, and I'm
Oh, thanks.
like, so
I think so. I think first you have to think about who you want to be. Look at people who are doing what you want to do. Like pick people in the industry, if it's OSINT, um, who are doing the things that you want to do, and then see what they're doing that you like. So if you're following one of the bigger names and they are posting walkthroughs all the time, and that's why you're drawn to them, consider doing that yourself. And I know there's a big gap. Everybody's like, oh, I can't do that, or it's already been done. Where do I start? But honestly, like everybody has their own uh, life, like unique life. You've gone through things. We could be doing the exact same blog and we would write it differently
yeah,
because of how you have lived versus how I've lived. So I think it doesn't matter if somebody's done something a million times, you still have your own unique perspective on it. So don't get caught up in that. Um, Write down like the things that you see in other people that you want, like recruiters or other people in the industry to see in you, whether it's like specific branding on your page or like things you talk about in your blog or how you present yourself in person. You don't have to fake. To a point, everybody fakes it, right? Like I might, if I seem confident at all, it's it's not true. Uh, so I think there is some level of kind of faking it until you believe it.
yeah,
But yeah, just follow what other people are doing, and eventually you will fall into your own brand. Like you will create your own brand because you can then pivot based on your feedback. An example of that is I would write blogs as a way first to teach myself concepts. So
yeah,
I would pick something like I'd go on Twitter and I would look at what people were talking about, OSINT wise, or what was in the news that week, and I would pick something like maybe I don't know, a prison was hacked,
yeah,
and I would write a blog on it. How would you use OSINT to hack a prison? Like I would just try and think of it a different, and this was before people started using Chat GPT, so you can just ask it
yeah,
for
yeah,
ideas. So then I would write a blog on it, and then I would post it, and it's marketing for me and it's content for me. But it's also teaching me like how to do this
yeah,
and how to research, and it also builds your brand and helps you look like an expert in the field because you're putting out content and you're not just taking. And that was always my big thing. I didn't want to take
yeah,
from the community if I wasn't giving something back, even if I thought it was crap when I put it out. But I did that on a maritime blog. I wrote about ships just randomly,
yeah,
and people loved it. So I wrote another one, and I wrote another one, and then I started talking about maritime, and that's kind of how that all happened. Like it was just a random blog I wrote that kind of kicked it off, and then I realized that people cared about it,
mm,
and I was like, maybe this could be my thing, my niche.
yeah,
And it ended up working out pretty well.
yeah.
So I mean, you never know like how it will pivot once you start.
Yeah, no, it's it's really interesting because it's like it just fell like you just randomly decided to post about a ship, and then here you are like years later and you're the kind of expert on maritime intelligence, and I've watched some of your walkthroughs and like on other shows, and it's been so interesting because as part of I do corporate intelligence, so I really don't necessarily come across like any vessels. Like I did a little bit in an internship more on the supply chain side, rather than
Yeah.
like geopolitical side. But so it was there anything that necessarily drew you to maritime intelligence, or is just like, okay, there's an audience for this, let me just specialize in this, or was there,
At first, it was content related. Like
yeah,
honestly, I was like, this is cool. I'm going to put this out, and then people were like, "Oh, that's really interesting." And they would comment and share it, and I started thinking this is something. This is something. It feels like something. So I wrote another one, and as I'm writing, you have to
yeah,
research for these blogs. So I'm researching and I'm getting into it, and then I'm finding things, and then people are asking me to look for things, and Like it grew. Like
Yeah.
my interest grew as everybody else's interest grew. And then, you have the Chinese fishing vessels becoming a thing, the Suez Canal being blocked, Russians' invasion of Ukraine, like all of that is hitting kind of around the same period of
Yeah.
time. So the interest and the need for maritime intelligence just shot
Yeah.
up. So it was like we came together at the perfect time.
Yeah. It's interesting. Like I studied far right extremism, and people ask me like, how did you decide to do that? Like that, why did you focus on that? I'm like, well, I lived next to the Capitol when like January 6th happened, and I'm like, so it kind of was like there's such a need in the news, so it feels like okay,
Yeah.
all I see so many headlines about, whether it's oligarchs on their yachts or, blockages or undersea cables or whatever it is. So it kind
Yeah.
of, yeah. So I'd love to like dig into that a little bit more. But before I do, I wanted to ask if you think people should kind of hone in on a niche if they're just getting started, or if they should do kind of the more generalist OSINT, because like maritime intelligence doesn't involve loads of different skills with satellite imagery as well as, another other types of analysis. So would you suggest kind of picking something first, or maybe just learning kind of the host of, the OSINT skill set and like kind of developing the mindset first, or, kind of how would you
Yeah.
go about that?
So I think a niche is really good, but people get hung up on what is my niche? What is it? I need to pick something. What is it? There's so many things.
Yeah,
And it becomes like a sticking point, and then you don't do
yeah,
anything. So I think broad research, like focus on kind of little bits of everything, and then if you just keep an eye out for something that is happening, something that you're doing that people seem to respond to, you can focus down into a niche eventually. And if you do get there and something does stick out, you can definitely use that on a resume. You can use that in your branding. You can use that to like sell yourself, especially in a job like in consulting, especially when you're working with so many people, having something that is yours, that people, when they think of your name, think of that.
yeah,
Like people think of me, they think of ships, and that's good. That helps me.
yeah.
Um, but I wouldn't go into it trying to find it. Like let it find you, I guess.
Okay, yeah, have it be more like natural and something
Yeah.
obviously that you're also interested in. You're not just like, oh, everyone talks about crypto, let me just do that, even though,
Right.
like, well, maybe I don't know if
Yeah.
everyone really does. Maybe it's just like my circles, but I hear, well, I do focus a lot about like scams, so it just so happens that
Yeah.
crypto comes up. But
Yeah.
yeah.
I
Uh,
don't understand it.
I've been trying. I've been really trying, but
It's
it,
hard.
it's freaking hard. Like,
Yeah.
um, so but pivoting to maritime, I to be honest with you, yeah, I didn't know a lot, and I've just been listening to some of your like talks, and if you could just explain like broadly before we go into like maybe nitty-gritty topics, like some of the most interesting things that like go into maritime intelligence. So it's not just big ships, like there are other aspects of it. I think you're mentioning like ports and, other kind of areas that could interest people. It's not like it's very much not a boring topic. So if you could kind of explain what maritime intelligence is.
Yes, it is very large. So you have, like you mentioned, there's different facets of it. Like you could be looking at it from a supply chain perspective or a geopolitical perspective. Um, you can look at ports, what's coming into ports, what's coming out of ports. Um, what are the companies that are helping shipments within the ports? What are the like telecommunications or supplies, like what's supplying the ports? Um, you have different areas, like geopolitical areas. You have like fishing vessels in China that are doing illegal fishing. You have the maritime militia in China that is confronting ships and trying to, state their areas over there. You have Russia and whatever they're doing at the time. You have undersea cables, people cutting the cables all over the world.
Mm.
Um, there's trafficking, there's drug trafficking and shipments, illegal oil shipments, sanctions. I mean, you name it. There's pirates. There's stuff everywhere that we can investigate, and oftentimes it overlaps.
Mm. So pirates do exist like they're still
Yeah,
pirates.
they do exist, but I don't think they're too active right now. I mean, in the movie, the Somali pirate movie came
Yeah.
out. That was like the
Yeah.
peak, I think. But there is a pirate tracker that
Hmm.
tracks like people getting on ships and
Okay.
assaulting other people on them. And it tracks what's happening. It tells you like all the areas and what's happening.
That's so interesting. And there are so many, like, I know you're not, I mean, you use tools. Everyone does, I think, to some extent, but like you don't
Yeah.
want to focus on them because, they become outdated. Like TweetDeck isn't like really a thing that a lot of people use. Twitter has changed so much, like social media, but then also the tools and they no longer work. But there is a way for people who are maybe new to the space. There are like these free tools where you can start kind of tracking vessels if that's what you're interested in, and maybe kind of learning more about the patterns I think you've mentioned. So, can you talk about like some of these abnormalities that you might look for if you're starting out and you want to start kind of figuring out like, oh, this might be something that I want to look at.
Yeah. So, like you said, that I'm very tool agnostic for the most part. Because first, I think new analysts get overwhelmed. They want to know all the
Yeah.
tools. Like they don't feel like they know what they're doing until they have a handle on all the tools. And I don't like to give out lists of tools because I think it hinders the analysis process. Like I think for an analyst to learn why they're looking at something and how they can investigate it with any tool is a better approach because like you said, tools come and go, and they're different one day
Right.
and one day to the next, and it might not work, and then if you rely on that, it doesn't work. But there are free tools for maritime. There's lots of websites where you can gather data like Quasis, or you can use Marine Traffic or
Hmm.
Vessel Finder. Those are free to a point.
Yeah.
They're free. Like you can look at vessels right now, and I think like a few hours ago.
Hmm.
But if you want any kind of historical data, they make you pay for that.
Okay.
Um, so when I'm looking for vessels, I'm looking for information on who they are and their numbers and like identification
Hmm.
information. And I'm looking for their current path, like AIS, automatic identification system
Hmm.
path. That's the pings that they send out to make sure nobody runs into them, but you can track them through that, and it gets mapped in marine traffic or whatever. Um, but more importantly, and that's why they make you pay,
Yeah.
is the historical patterns around that. Like if I see a ship right now in LA, the port of LA,
Hmm.
like cool, but I want to know, where has it been the last year?
Yeah.
Does it go there all the time? Is this the first time it's been there? Does it meet with other ships all the time? Does it, drop cargo off there? I need to see the past to understand the present, I guess.
Yeah. And also there is some sort of I history to maybe where it can't go in certain like geographic locations as well. Is that right? Like you would kind of have to recognize like, okay, it maybe this makes sense why it's going that way rather than this way or in that
Yeah.
direction.
Yeah, and a good example of that is around China, like around Taiwan. You might think that a vessel going in a certain place is weird, but when you take into account the nine dash line and all the weird stuff that's around China there, that makes them route in a certain way, uh, then it's not so weird. So you have to understand the area and kind of a little bit of the history of the area. Are there lots of wars there? Do the wars mean that they're doing certain things with their shipping or certain ports? And then you have like the canals, the Suez Canal, and important waterways. And when they shut down, all the ships go like around Africa. Just patterns like that you have to kind of understand.
Yeah.
It's a lot of like learning over time.
Okay. So you wouldn't, I feel like, I don't know, I'm maybe not necessarily going to get into this, but if I were, I might be a little bit overwhelmed with like the amount of like information that's actually available. Like, how do you even
Yeah.
focus on, like, do you recommend maybe just like picking something and then just running with it and trying to track it?
Yeah, I mean, I will tell you, I get overwhelmed. I do a lot of work in the China,
Okay.
Indo-PACOM region, and sometimes I get pulled over, I'm doing work in Russia or around Africa, and I have to focus on that
Yeah.
and forget everything about China for a little while.
Yeah.
And even in like a week or two, so much has happened that like people are tagging me and stuff, and I'm like, I don't know what's happening. I don't understand. And then I gotta like
Yeah.
catch up, and
Yeah.
it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot for even me. So
Okay.
I think it's okay to feel overwhelmed, but I think just like a niche in your OSINT, like investigate, like research analysis skills,
Yeah.
it's good to have a niche in like areas that you look at. Like I do a lot of Chinese research. That's what I know very well.
Okay.
Does that mean I don't do any research in Russia or anywhere else? No. I definitely do that, but I focus a lot of effort in the
Yeah.
Chinese region, and I can answer things more quickly without looking it up, I guess.
Yeah. And like beyond just like the volume of information and like things moving very rapidly, are there any challenges like specific that you could tell us about? Whether that's kind of manipulation, which I just found really interesting to learn about. So I'd love if you could share a bit about that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely one of the more fun things to look at. So ships that are doing um, illicit things, illegal activity, will manipulate their identity. On board, they can change how they are broadcasted to the world.
Mm,
So they can change their identification numbers. They can change the way the ship looks. So sometimes they will paint the deck, or they will lay tarps on the deck because we look at them from satellite. So they think if it's a sanctioned vessel and they're trying to ship illegal oil or something and they don't want people to know, and their deck is normally
yeah.
green, if they put blue tarps down, that we won't be able to figure out that it's the same vessel.
Wow.
They will black out parts of their identifying number on the side.
Mm,
Um, they'll do all sorts of weird things like that. And they'll shut their AIS off entirely,
mm,
which we call going dark. So they might go halfway, turn it off, go dark, and then we can't track them in that period of time. And then they'll turn it back on. So we have to find more creative ways to capture them during that time, whether it's finding them on satellite or finding pictures of them or something like that.
yeah.
So that's always fun, trying to figure out like what they're doing.
Yeah, no, well, like, what are the other creative ways? Like, I think, there are obviously maybe in certain scenarios you might get lucky and find something on social media, but other than that, or is social media still a part of like
Yeah.
your workflow?
It is. Twitter kind of killed that
Yeah.
for me. I used that a lot. There were a lot of maritime analysts on there, and now they're kind of spread out all over the place.
Okay.
So I still check it out of habit,
Yeah.
but I used to be able to have tweet decks of all the regions and keep track that way. So that makes me a little
Yeah,
sad. But
it's beautiful.
one of my favorite tricks, I think, is that if it's a fleet, or if the vessels travel together, like if you think of military vessels, usually it's not just one military vessel, right?
Hmm.
It's several. So even if one or two or three have their AIS off, one probably doesn't.
Mm,
So if you can understand that they are traveling together, sailing together, and you find that one, you can kind of assume the other ones are with it, and then you can go to satellite or something like that and try to like double verify that it's there. But yeah, usually they don't all turn their AIS off. So
Okay.
that's a good trick to try and find a lot of vessels.
Okay. That's interesting. And you mentioned like so you're I mean obviously you do loads of different regions, but you know a lot about China. And I think you mentioned like a part of it undersea cables. That's just like been my I've just been seeing a lot of it in the news. There has been I think it was like last month. I forget the name of it now. Estrid 2, I think it was the cable. I don't it, that was cut.
I think so.
Yeah.
There's been so
There's been
many,
so
and
many.
I've been, like I said, I've been in looking at another region, and people have just been pinging me like
Oh God.
undersea cable, and I'm like, I can't look right now.
Oh no. Okay, then maybe I won't bring it up. I feel bad
No,
now.
no, that's
Like,
okay. I've looked at a lot. I've looked at a lot of them, like in the Norway
okay,
region,
yeah,
because they have so many coastlines that they have a lot of cables up there. So I've done a lot of uh, research, at least personal
yeah.
research, just out of curiosity, at some of the times they've cut cables there.
So, like, I saw one site where you can see like a map of loads of different ones, but how public is the information about these undersea cables? Like, I know some are like further to the surface, you can see more, but to what extent do we know about where they are and like who owns them?
I think the typical public data is, there's maps, there's subsea cable maps, and you can go, they're like free to look at online. They're roughly in the area that they show there.
Okay.
So it's not like a very precise location. So it's not like you could pinpoint it on a map, that you just know it's in that region. Um, and then you can click on it and it'll tell you who owns
Okay.
it, where it goes, like where the points are that it connects with land. Um, you can find out things like who supplied it, who built it, all of that. But I think when they're cutting it, for the most part, they're just like dragging an anchor across until they hit it. They know about where it is.
Hmm.
And it's just like a random try and run it over kind of thing, or they have like undersea drone things to like drag behind that cut them.
Hmm. And when you say they, can you explain like why might a country want to go about cutting a cable? Like, what is the significance, like geopolitically?
I think there's a few reasons. The first one's just disruption of service. Like if it's an island or something and it only has one main cable going to it and you cut it, then you've disrupted all the service to that area. I think more often, recently at least, it's just like to wreak havoc,
Mm,
to just
interesting.
show like we can do
Yeah,
this, or get everyone asking who did this, why did they do it, and it's like this big
yeah,
thing. um or they're just trying to like disrupt normal day-to-day activity,
yeah. That's interesting.
is my take on it. I mean, will we ever know? I don't
Well,
know.
that's the thing. Yeah, and like obviously attribution is a big thing that's a challenge. Like, can OSINT help with that in any way, or is it just really difficult to pinpoint like who is to blame for certain cables being cut?
It's difficult to blame with OSINT because you can see the ships in the area. You can note their strange behavior, their patterns. Maybe they're going back and forth over where a cable is, or they're there in that time frame and they're Chinese or Russian, and you can kind of infer that things have
Yeah,
happened. But unless you're the Coast Guard, or the military, and you're boarding the vessel and like investigating, you're only making guesses.
yeah,
Like you can only speculate that like these are possibly the ships that are involved.
yeah. The more I've heard about it, like the scarier, like the more scared I've become in a way because I feel like they are so vulnerable and there's not really mu unless like the
Yeah.
Coast Guard is physically there monitoring, what's going on, there's not really much that's being done to, protect these cables that are very important.
Yeah. Yeah, and you see the oceans on the map and you're like, "Oh, that's pretty big." But like when you see all the ships in the ocean, you realize like how absolutely vast it is.
Yeah,
And when you have a cable running through it, I'm like, it's just one little cable in the middle of the ocean.
right.
How do you protect it
Yeah,
unless you patrol it?
yeah,
And even then, I mean, ships still have to go over it. They're in like main waterways.
right. Yeah, it's just like very interesting. But I'll move on because maybe people
Yeah,
are
I don't know the
like,
solution, to be honest.
no, no, I
I
mean,
do know that it's just going to keep getting worse, most likely.
that's what it seems like based on my like the news that I'm reading. And like no one really knows, what to do about this. So I guess I'm sure we'll be hearing more. Uh,
It's like drones. Nobody knows what to do about
yeah,
it.
exactly. Um, so, uh, and I guess moving on for maritime, because I realize I have loads more questions and we don't have that much time. I did want to bring up like another like big topic, and we don't, have to discuss every aspect of it, but you are writing a book on OSINT and AI, and I
Yes.
saw you wrote a recent blog post and you've been posting about some like AI applications and I guess I'll just start off with a question that I have heard at conferences, I've heard other people say it, like I'm afraid of being replaced by AI. What would you say to someone who's, rather than feeling like AI is my friend and it could be helpful, who are like kind of scared of it? Like what would you kind of tell them?
I think a lot of people are scared of
Yeah.
AI because it's so new and we're just learning how to use it and what it can do. I would say, sure, some jobs will be replaced by AI. I mean, it makes things easier. But I think intelligence, even with AI, requires a human analyst to confirm the data. AI can make patterns, but a human still has to look at it and say, yes, this makes sense, and kind of verify. I like to think, and nobody knows what the future is going to be with AI. We can guess, we can speculate, but I like to think and hope that it will just be AI enabled analysts. Like it's our little junior analyst next to us doing all the work that we don't want to do, and then we get to do the deeper level analysis.
Yeah.
That's my dream. That's what I'm hoping for. That's how I'm writing the book. So I guess that has to be true then.
Yeah, no, of course, 100%. I'm impressed. I don't know if you read Co-Intelligence by Ethan Mollick. It's more of like a general AI book. But I read it like last month. My dad has actually gotten very into AI, and I'm like, okay, I'm getting more into AI now, and now I've become kind of obsessed. And basically the premise, like the book, was written with the subtext being like, I know this will change like so rapidly, even from like a few months. So I'm very impressed by how you're writing a book because, and your first book, which I will plug, I have it right here.
Oh, thank you. And you can't even see it. I have a stack of them over here.
Okay, yeah, it's out of the frame. Um, I'm impressed that you're going about it because, things are moving so fast. And so, like your recent blog talked about the AI mindset, which I think could be, evergreen while we're going about learning about this and kind of, again, we can still have these new tools, but they'll come and go. So can you talk more about like what the AI mindset is right now to you and like what that means?
Yeah, so it's the only way you can write a book, like, to
Yeah,
be honest,
fair.
because as soon as it's printed, it's going to be out of date,
Yeah,
and I didn't want to write something that's going to go out of date that
yeah.
fast. And honestly, it tracks kind of with my other book where I don't want to focus on tools, and I realize AI is like the big tool that when you're talking about it, you have to mention it. But I think you can go into it with a mindset that doesn't get you boxed in by any specific AI tool. Because is ChatGPT going to be around in 5 years? I don't know. Are they
Yeah.
going to? It feels like when search engines became like popular, and we had like Ask Jeeves and Excite and like all these different things that we were trying to use, and everybody used a different one,
Yeah.
and eventually we all just decided that Google was like the one.
Right.
So I feel like eventually it's gonna culminate in like one big thing that we all use.
Yeah.
But right now, it's just a lot,
Yeah.
and I see analysts who, especially like older analysts who have been doing it for a while. I think it can be hard to shift to using AI because, first of all, you don't trust it,
Right.
and you think it's going to hallucinate, it's going to give you false data, and it might. But as an analyst, you have to be able to verify even everyday info that's not coming through AI. So I don't think it's much different than that. It's just coming to you really fast.
Yeah.
Um, I think that having a mindset, like a creative mindset, like how you think about problems, how you think about your workflow. I'm doing XYZ, you know, Y takes 2 hours.
Yeah.
How can I make that faster? Maybe I can fit some sort of AI tool in there. Whether that tool changes 3 years from now or 6 months from now, it might, but it still do the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think thinking about your prompts and your workflow and things like that, that's where I'm focusing.
Hmm.
So like you said, it can hopefully be evergreen or at least a year.
No, for sure. For
I'm
sure.
hoping.
No, well, I mean, this AI book I read, like, even though things had changed, I so personally learned a lot from it, especially you talked about like, well, two things, the workflow and like the prompting. So can you give any examples of something that you found like in your workflow that you've been able to speed up so far? Just as an example of like how something in regards hopefully to OSINT that you've been able to kind of like speed up rather than like, like making a spreadsheet. Like, yes, like it will, obviously be helpful with that or writing code or whatever. But is there anything, specifically that you found day to day? It's like, okay, this is helping me.
Yeah, I think it's hard right now to get a whole lot of OSINT use out of it outside of I don't want to say making spreadsheets, but like ingesting data and then making it easier to understand
Yeah.
and find patterns in it. That's kind of how I've been using
Hmm.
it, without like a specific paid tool or
Yeah.
something like that that does something fancy. Just like the everyday person who can pick up AI without any
Yeah.
coding. I feel like that is the best way to go about it. Trying to just ingest the information that you use all the time. Like if you have a PDF or you are always exporting a certain report and you need to analyze it, like having AI sit in there and make it easier for you is probably the best.
Yeah.
Like I have access to some fancy AI tools. So that's what I use for OSINT, but
Yeah.
like trying to write it for the everyday analyst, like that's what I would say right now is
Okay.
if you don't want to learn how to code, and I hate coding, I'm trying to think of ways to prompt it to just speed up my everyday ingestion of information and pattern recognition.
Yeah. I've been doing the same thing, so I understand
Yeah.
you on that part. And like just in case people don't know, like prompting as in maybe actually I'll let you give a definition. Like what does that mean and like how can we make our prompting better?
Prompting is basically just how you talk to the AI, right?
Yeah.
Like how you ask it to do things and give you an output. So one thing I've been doing a lot since the new year is, trying to save money, budgeting, you know, outside of OSINT, I'm having it making grocery lists for
Mm,
me and like
I love that. I love
and
that.
like bi-weekly recipes.
Mm,
So I give it all the parameters like I have these things in my pantry. I need
yeah.
to use these. My son doesn't like smushy things. I want to eat low calorie.
Yeah.
Uh, give me 14 meals that fit into this and give me the stay in the budget of X dollars and put it in like a spreadsheet,
Yeah.
and then it'll do that. I can print it out as like a PDF. So that's like a stupid little thing
Yeah.
that it just helps me because I do it every 2 weeks,
Yeah.
and
No.
I have it synced up. It tells me like the Kroger prices for everything. So even if it's not perfectly accurate, it gives me like a roundabout.
Yeah. Yeah,
And it prints me out recipes, and I'm like, okay, recipe done. Don't even have to think about it.
I just got an air fryer and I've been asking it like, what do I make in the air fryer? And I've said so many things like every day. I'm just like ChatGPT like so yeah, just
Yeah.
like small like kind of sillier things like that. Yeah, absolutely. And you
But I think that's also where people get caught up, is because right now, and I will admit that I feel this too, is there's so much going on.
yeah,
Like, here's a prompt, here's the tool, this is cool now, this is not, this changed. It feels like it's just like being forced into your face,
yeah,
AI all day.
yeah,
How do you keep up with it? And I don't know how to keep up with it.
yeah,
So I feel that from analysts trying to, like, they want to integrate it, they want to make their workflow
yeah,
faster, but they don't know where to start, like how to make it easy. And I read books and blogs, and I've started to like pick up more AI content as I'm like writing, and I'm trying to think of how I can distill this down to like the most simple process for
yeah,
somebody to follow
yeah,
to integrate AI.
yeah.
So that's my goal. That's what I'm hopefully I can achieve it. We'll see in May when my book is supposed to be done in 2026.
Oh, well, there's time and also I'm confident.
Yeah.
Like you knocked it out of the park with your first one. I'm like, you got this. I'm excited for it personally. And like obviously we're talking about kind of these like good uses for it, but it does have of course its setbacks and it does hallucinate and make things up. And I think, some of it the criticism is that, oh, well, I'll have to then take a lot of time to check loads of its sources and make sure they're accurate, or not just accurate, that they're timely. They're not from like a year ago, or they're not just pulling from Wikipedia. So, how do you kind of combat, like, let's say it just keeps, how do you make sure that you're verifying the information? I do you think it's kind of these same processes that should already be kind of ingrained as we're dealing with mis and disinformation, like with verification, we should already be verifying, right? So is it the same sorts of processes that we're going through to verify?
Yeah, I would argue you should already be doing it.
Yeah.
So I do hear that argument often, like, oh, well, I have to verify all this, and like, you should, I feel like you should be doing this
Yeah.
already. Uh, and I get it. The downside is AI is providing you loads of information that you have to look through, but ask it to make it less. Like, ask it to parse the data down.
Yeah.
Ask it to give you more specific information, and then you verify it.
Yeah.
I think it's something we're just going to have to do. There are AI certain tools out there that do, as I've been like researching, there are some that provide sources better. I know when I'm doing research for school, I use Perplexity
Hmm.
that gives like a whole bunch of sources versus like ChatGPT, where I've noticed it gives me sources for things and then I go to verify them and they just don't
Yeah.
exist. I'm like, where did you even get this from?
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think there will be AI tools that are more trustworthy and built for intelligence. And there are some out there now that like do validations and only provide you verified data.
Hmm.
But there will always be some sort of check. I mean, that's why you are not being replaced by AI, right?
Yeah.
So if you're not doing the verification, I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah. And like I actually just started using Perplexity, and it's with the sources, it's been more specific, and I found it to be
yeah.
more accurate, which has been nice. Are there any, yeah, you said there's more specific tools, even if some are paid, like is there anything you're recommending? Is one thing better? I mean, they're just different. It's not maybe necessarily better, but is there anything, you would say that's more specific to like our field, or it only is pulling sources? I forget the technical term now, but it only pulls sources from a specific like subset of information rather than just like everything.
Yeah, I think it's tricky because if you're using it for work, it's got to go through all these approvals and be like very specific to the
Yeah.
company and the industry you're working in, and it's hard to, I think, say what's going to be allowed and what's not,
Yeah.
and what companies think is good. Um, I I personally, I'm trying like a bunch of them. I don't want to code, so I'm not I'm looking into how to do it so I can write about it, but I don't want to like insist that people learn to code to use AI because I don't think that's what it's going to be.
Yeah.
I pay for ChatGPT, I pay for Perplexity, and that's all I pay for right
Okay.
now.
Yeah.
I, that's what I use. I'd still verify everything
Yeah.
that comes out of it. But if you, it's like cable, you know, like you gave up cable to get Netflix and Hulu and
Yeah.
all of these other things, and now you have 5 million of them,
Yeah.
and you're paying for each one individually, and it's like paying like $5 million for each of these ones. It's like, I think pick one that works for you and stick with it, or one or two, whatever you can afford. I don't think there's any need to go out and buy like all of the
Yeah.
different ones, and like one of them does images and one does video, and in like a month they're all going to do all of that. So like
Yeah.
I'm just kind of feeling it and waiting it out. But I am reading about the other ones just to kind of get a handle on it.
Yeah.
It's a very overwhelming thing
Yeah.
right now, I think, for everybody.
Yeah, I'm definitely feeling that. And I'm like, when I get bombarded with information, then I think some people like retreat and they're just paralyzed by it and
Yes.
then they just ignore it. But I think that's not really the answer because we are all, maybe not we, everyone, but I think analysts are going to be using it in some capacity and we shouldn't just like ignore
Yeah.
it. It's not going away. And it's just growing more rapidly. So I think like just,
It's a buzzword,
yeah.
and C-suite people are going to start forcing the AI use like down the chain, and because it's cool, and
Yeah.
I think people are going to have to adapt to it. So
Yeah.
get ahead of the curve, start like researching it now. My suggestion is avoid all the chatter and all of the different things. Write down your workflow. Look at your workflow. Look at what you can speed up, where the gaps are, and then look at tools that might accomplish several of those things.
Yeah.
And just like kind of avoid all the other stuff. It's cool to go on and listen to all the different prompts, but it can get very overwhelming.
Yeah. And I do like kind of like using it as a more of assistant to be like even some creativity. Like I like to think I'm like kind of
Yeah.
creative and just bouncing off kind of like ideas that it's not like information that I need to verify. It's just like creative ideas of like, I don't know, a story or a concept or like a visualization or something like this. So I think that's a
Yeah.
nice, yeah.
And I've done things like, if I was a world-renowned OSINT analyst, how would I do
Yeah.
XYZ? And just to see what it
Yeah.
says. And sometimes it does have some really good ideas that, like, you get so exhausted doing the same things all the time
Right.
that you just need somebody, something,
Yeah.
some robot assistant to be like, poke, poke, do
Exactly.
this thing over here.
Yeah. We'll just
So,
keep using it. That doesn't, it's not allowed to get
yeah,
tired. So
yeah,
um just I will like jump to our last section and I like something I loved about your book was all of the pronouns were she and her and like I just that to me like not only are you like well I think you're quite inspiring like well there's still underrepresentation of women, I think, in this field, and like tech fields more generally. And I think that's kind of, when you go down to the OSINT level, it's also like the similar issues, where there's still overwhelmingly loads of men and in like there's some lack of diversity is what I feel like I've seen. So yeah, I really like that about the book. And like
did you notice that yourself, or did you hear me say that on an
no,
interview?
no, genuinely I did because I am so like used to using he and like even in a context of where I'm just speaking,
Yeah,
like I'll say, "Oh, he did this." And I'm like, "Wait a second." Like my brain like implicitly is still defaulting to he him.
yeah.
And I feel like yeah, it's even just things like this where you can just switch it and that's a form of representation, which is really important. So yeah,
Yeah.
and then obviously I did hear you say it, but I think it's like it was good to point out to people to be like, okay, this was an intentional decision that I made.
Yeah.
So
It was my little secret rebellion. I wanted to see like how many people
yeah,
noticed it.
yeah. No, I love that. And you wrote like a blog post, I think like a couple years ago about ways to support ways to support women in OSINT. And like I was just wondering how that came about, like what inspired you to write that post, I think with like some other people as well.
I think at the time, you're asking me to remember back in time.
Sorry.
I think at the time I had a friend who was having some issues at their job, and it kind of inspired me to write about it because they were struggling with like just working with some men that were not being so helpful to her career, and it just first of all made me angry. And
Yeah.
I found the most productive way was to write a blog instead of screaming into the void.
Yeah. No, fair enough. And like just so people can learn about what was in the blog, it was like 10 ways support women, and I'll just read off some of them. Empower women to showcase their technical skills, offering equal mentorship opportunities, creating a safe space, um, champion women's ideas, be flexible, promote inclusivity, and you can check it out if you like on Ray's blog, or like LinkedIn. But do you think the first one, just like on the technical skills, can you like maybe dispel a myth that like women aren't technical? Like why is this one of your top ways to support women?
Um, so I think I noticed this being in consulting and corporate that some weird things happen when you enter like a meeting, like all the men talk technical stuff and the woman gets told to take the notes in the back. Like,
Yeah,
can you keep the notes? And
yeah,
I'm like, oh,
yeah,
no. I think that that's dumb to think that women aren't technical. I mean, that makes no sense.
yeah,
Can I code or anything? No. But does that make me not technical? No, I don't think so. Um, I, I mean, I don't think there's any that there's no basis for
yeah,
um,
yeah,
that myth at all. I think the problem is that men need to step aside a little and give us room to talk because I think a lot of women are just quiet or they don't want to put themselves out there and to be ridiculed or put down. So when you have a room, and in tech this happens all the time,
yeah,
you're in a room full of men and you are the only woman, and you might have allies in there, but they're still men,
yeah,
and you don't feel like there's a full ally, right? And you don't want to just like blurt out something that could be wrong and somebody could make fun of, or then you're labeled not technical. And so I think just like stepping back and being like, does anybody have anything they want to say, or whatever the meeting's about, and just giving like a moment to like and tell everybody else to shut up, or asking them directly,
yeah.
uh not putting them on the spot, but like giving them the chance to show that they have skills.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like I don't code either. But I wouldn't say I'm not like, I'm not technical, and like I think yeah, I've definitely had that experience. Like I there are a lot of male allies, like including those in UK OSINT who like literally started it and then have allowed me to kind of like, speak on this webinar and like listen to my ideas, and I think that's great, but I think yeah, there definitely needs to be more of it. And for me to not be like so shocked that that's happening. But I think
Yeah.
like luckily that it is like very slowly changing. And what's been nice is like we've been hosting some like in-person events, and like more than 50% or like at least 50% there have been women there, and other people. So that's been cool to see. So I think it is changing, but like very
Yeah.
slowly.
I think it's very intimidating.
Yeah.
Like I see even in-person meetings, so I've been setting up this local like OSINT meeting
Hmm.
here. And like the one thing I keep thinking is like, how do we make it so that women want to show up?
Yeah.
Because as soon as you label anything technical or intelligence or anything like that, I feel like there's just this wall of intimidation and people just don't want to
Yeah.
just don't want to go there. And like I don't know the solution
Yeah.
to that. Um, but that's a big issue. And I do find that especially in OSINT intelligence, women are really good at
Yeah.
it. Like I think just naturally we have to be more observant,
Yeah.
and they're there. They're in the community. I
Yeah.
know they exist. Whether they're just shy or they're not talking or not putting themselves out there or they don't want to, I don't know.
Yeah.
But they are there. So if you work with some or interact with them, just try and support them as much as you can. I know it's not all men.
Yeah.
In the community, there are many supportive people.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but it's just tech in general, I think.
Yeah, it's just like the field itself, and even just, yeah, like
Yeah.
STEM, like like historically it's not been like it's been a male dominated field. So I think, yeah, this goes along into intelligence especially as well, like the contributions of women who were, spies at like World War II. Like I pick up books and I'm like, oh, like okay, they exist. They've always been out there, but it's just like knowing
Yeah.
and like lifting them up. So yeah, I think that's definitely so true. And like, yeah, intimidation, yeah, that's very real. Just being like imposter syndrome and like, oh, I don't know as much as I
Oh yeah,
do.
that never goes away.
Yeah, no.
No.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know that there's a solution to that other than pretending it doesn't exist.
Yeah, fake it till you make it. That's it.
Yeah.
But I think like I'll wrap up there. Like, is there anything I didn't bring up that like you wanted to talk about?
I don't think so, other than so if you're interested in OSINT and you want more practical experience, you mentioned case
Yes.
scenarios. You can go to case scenarios and they're like uh low cost. I mean, we're talking like $50 and under. I think we just lowered the price, so it's probably more like 25.
Okay.
They're practical, like hands-on. A lot of them are like true crimey. They have different focuses, and you go and you answer questions. It's not a capture the flag. It's literally a scenario. You are the person in the scenario trying to accomplish a task,
Mm-hmm.
whether you're a detective or whatever. So if you're looking for something practical, because that's another thing I always hear is like, where do I start? What do I do?
Yeah.
How do I practice this without getting like hacked or whatever, or sent to jail?
Doxed, yeah, whatever it is.
Yeah, right. So it's an easy way to practice, and a lot of stuff is really high cost in tech.
Yeah.
Some of the trainings and stuff. So we try and keep it really low cost. So that's out there if anybody's interested.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people will be, and like I actually would love to try it. And like with your design background, I'm sure like so were you like instrumental in like making the actual design of it, or like how I haven't tried it, so I don't really know how it works, but
Yeah, the first ones I did a lot of. I taught myself how to do
mm,
video because I learned it in art school, but it's been quite a while.
yeah.
So I taught myself how to do like video stuff, and then like I created most of the graphics, and I worked together with Espen Ringstad, who kind of created a lot of the scenarios, and then we put them together and worked through them with like beta tests and stuff.
Hmm,
The newer ones, we have more people working. We have like a marketing person now and
cool.
some other people just helping. So I don't do as many graphics as I used to,
Hmm.
but it's still very cool. And the scenarios are while they are sometimes a little out there, like you're solving a murder or something, it's still very relevant to everyday work. Like we're not asking you to do things that you wouldn't do in a job.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
Very
so
interesting.
hopefully it's training, good training.
For sure. Yeah, and I don't know anything else like it, to be honest with you. Like I think, yeah, I learned about it off just like from finding your profile, and a few others in the community have definitely mentioned it as well. And like I really just see a lot of, either online courses just that you can purchase, and they might get a little bit like repetitive and you can't like really visualize what you'd actually be doing. So yeah, it sounds really unique. I'm eager to try it
Yeah,
myself.
we try to mesh like we both like true crime a lot, and then we both do OSINT,
Hmm.
Espen and I. So that's what we were trying to blend, like the two things together,
Perfect.
to make it feel more realistic.
Yeah, and like I heard you had a spreadsheet of true crime things that you watch, apparently.
Yes, I have not updated it in quite
Ah,
some
okay. I was gonna
time.
ask, like, what are the
I still have it. I can
okay,
share it.
okay, because I'm also interested in true crime and like, have you been watching anything recently?
I watched what is it, Kings of Tupelo? How do you, I don't know how you say that, but it's on
Okay.
Netflix. It's really weird. It's like Tiger King level
Oh,
weird
okay.
about like an Elvis impersonator. Um yeah, you just there's no way to explain it.
I'm gonna watch
You
it.
just have to watch
Yeah,
it.
I love weird stuff like that. It's like, okay, noted.
Yeah, that was really wild.
Um,
That's the most recent one I watched. But yeah, I kept a spreadsheet because I would watch so many
yeah,
that I would rewatch them, and then halfway through I'd be like, I this sounds so familiar. So I had to keep a spreadsheet so I wouldn't rewatch them or re-listen.
that's so funny. I've done that myself and been like, I recognize all these characters. Why? Like, so
Yeah.
funny.
And I'm like, is this just really similar to another case? I don't know. But my like go-tos are like 2020 is my like
Okay,
go-to background
nice. Yeah,
because there's like 5 million of
yeah.
them.
You just keep watching and it's like
And
background
it's so
noise.
dramatic. Yeah.
Fair enough. Well, where can people find you, like primarily, and like you have loads of resources other than your book, which everyone should get and look for the next one. But like, where do you mostly post, or you have a blog?
I post, well, I used to post a lot on Twitter. I don't so much anymore.
Yeah,
I post a lot on LinkedIn. You can find me there. I am on Blue Sky. I don't post there as much as I should, but I do post there. And then my website, which is raebaker.net, is where I post all my blogs, but I share them on LinkedIn. So, I think and I have a YouTube. I haven't updated in a while. I've been very busy. But
fair,
there are videos on there.
fair enough. Cool. Well, thank you so much. This has been so interesting and fun. Like, you're very easy to talk to.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, it's been fun. I'm glad we finally got to connect after all the back and
Yeah,
forth.
no, for sure.